Great. My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our big book approach to the step 4 inventory, specifically the resentment inventory, specifically column 3 and column 4. We're taking a very narrow, laser-focused, and very deep analytical approach based on my knowledge and my experience of the big book and an interpretation, which my step guide called an expanded column 3 and an expanded column 4. True to the big book interpretation, the letter, but giving a lot more juice to the spirit of it. Please, you're all on mute. Please join me in the serenity prayer just to get ourselves a little warmed up and focused. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So today we're going to do a deep dive, experiential deep dive. It's a workshop. You're here. I'm not sure what your motives are. Why are you here? But my hope for you is that you do some work, personal work. It'll feel a little bit like a class at sometimes, but it's really an opportunity for you personally to deal with the areas of your own disturbance. The work here in column 3, column 4, I attribute to the beginning of my spiritual awakening. I didn't know it at the time, 1988. As Melissa indicated, I got sober in 1984, a story again for a different day. And I got a sponsor and I went to meetings and I read the book and I worked the steps on my own. I didn't get any help and therefore I didn't get any change because I didn't know what I was doing and I couldn't read the big book. As simple as the English language is in the big book, I could read it, I just couldn't understand it. I could read it, I just couldn't apply it. I didn't know that I didn't know. And I thought I was like a good AA member, going to book studies and step studies and participating, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't change. I didn't know that I didn't change because I didn't know that change was necessary. And then I engaged a man to help me. Like, I'm here to help you today. That's my total goal, is to help you understand, to clarify, perhaps to have an experience with the 3rd and 4th column. I didn't know I was having an experience with it until down the road when I finished the step work and I looked back over my shoulder and I saw, oh, wow, I've really changed. Even though I was having some experiences during the time I was doing the column 3 and column 4 work, I wasn't aware that I was having the experience. I was so enmeshed in the experience. I'm saying that because this may be your experience today. You just sort of hunker down and you listen and you do a little bit of work. And if you're courageous enough, you'll do some dialogue here because I'm very encouraging some Q&A throughout, and we'll have some formal periods for it. And it may be that tomorrow or next week or next month that you will be aware that you had an experience with the work that you do today. So don't necessarily expect the aha moment, the curtain parting moment to happen today, although it's highly likely it will. No matter how much work you've done up till now, especially if you've never been exposed to me and the work that you're going to be exposed to today. I look forward to the journey with you. But because you have some information and you've had some experience in doing step 4, that's just a confirmation of step 4 from the big book, page 59. Made us searching and fearless. Now notice I've capitalized moral. It's not capitalized in the big book, but I wanted to draw your attention to it. Because some people approach step 4 from a negative standpoint, that it is a list of our immorality. And that's just not true. That's why Bill used the term moral. And you look it up in a dictionary and it means values. An inventory of our values. We do that by looking at our resentment and our fears and our dishonesty and our sexual inappropriate behavior, so that we in fact contrast that with our values, because in fact we have these negative behaviors and feelings and thoughts which are going against our values. I didn't know I had values. I didn't know I had principles. I didn't know that I needed principles that I didn't have until I did the searching and fearless inventory. Einstein said the consciousness that created the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. If my problem is me and my mind and my perception and my interpretation of reality, if that's my problem, I cannot address the problem with that same defective mind. I need a new consciousness. That's what this man said to me. Herb, look at my hands. You have a lot of information, but you have no transformation. You have a lot of academic knowledge, but it's never been filtered through your heart, through your experience, to your feet. You have not changed. 4 years sober, with all the information, with all the diligence, with all the goodwill and intention that you have, you think you're a Renaissance man. You're actually a Neanderthal. Now, he wasn't being disrespectful. He was telling me the truth, willing to hurt my feelings so that maybe I'd be willing to set aside my old information and my old experience up to that point and have an ability to be open to new information and a new experience. And that's the point of this prayer. He called it the set aside prayer. It's not a prayer so I set it aside, because I'm powerless to do that. It's a prayer for spiritual intervention, whatever it is you believe about God or higher power or spirit or energy or nature, life force, life source, whatever it is you believe. I'm assuming that you've had some exposure and experience with steps 2 and 3. And that you have something that you believe in that is available to you as a power that will, in fact, heal you. That's the whole point of steps 2 and 3. But you choose that. I'll use the traditional word God here in this prayer. But it's a prayer to bring the divine healer, the divine surgeon, bring your sharp scalpel to remove the cancer from my soul. I can't. I'm willing to be changed. Hear that? My willingness is my responsibility. A willingness to be open to the intervention of a power other than myself. Not necessarily outside myself, but a power other than myself, perhaps, as the big book suggests, deep down inside of me. It is not me, but it is available to me. I'm inviting spiritual intervention. I'm inviting spiritual surgery. I'm inviting spiritual healing. And I'm going to cooperate with the work that we're going to do today. My role, my willingness, my effort. Please join me. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, my previous step 4 resentment work, and you. For an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, my previous step 4 resentment work, and especially you. So I hope you have a piece of paper and a pencil, a pen, or if you're doing it electronically, that's available to you. Those of you who have skills with the technology, because I'm inviting you now in the milieu of that prayer, in the environment of that prayer, in the willingness to have your knowledge and your experience set aside. I'm asking you, I'm inviting you to reflect. Where are you currently disturbed? Not yesterday, today, right here, as you sit here. I'm using that term very thoughtfully and specifically because of step 10. Many of you have done step 4 work. Many of you do not have actual gross resentment. Some of you just have disturbances. That's the word in the 10th step. In the 12 and 12, whenever I'm disturbed, it says it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. If you have any resistance to that, you probably haven't done a step 4 out of the big book. More about that as we progress over this next. I plan on being with you here for about 3 hours. I hope you stay. I'll stay as long as you're engaged in what we're doing here, whether it's longer than the 3 hours or not. What are my current disturbances? People, circumstances. You hear mouthed in meetings, people, places, and things. Please pay attention to your words. Places and things has no meaning. Circumstances, events, those have meaning. People, circumstances, events, those can disturb me because of my perception of them. What are my current disturbances today? Irritations and annoyances. Irritations and annoyances. What are the sources of this suffering? Notice I didn't ask what is the suffering. The suffering is the smoke. The source is underneath. The source is the fire. Bill talks about in the 12 and 12, instincts gone awry. It's wonderful. I mean, he wasn't an educated man. I mean, in the truest, broadest sense. So he had lots of information. He took a law course and got a law degree. He never passed the bar or anything. But so he had some, he was brilliant. I mean, very bright and had some information from his own experience, but he didn't know much about biology or psychology in a formal sense. He had wonderful intuitions about both. Instincts gone awry, fight, flight, and freeze. Those are the sources of our suffering. Instincts for survival, instincts for safety, instincts for satisfaction, instincts for our social needs. I'm using words very precisely. body, mind, emotions, our spiritual needs. Do you actually have resentments? Well, what is a resentment? The word comes from the Latin sentire, S-E-N-T-I-R-E, which means to feel. Now, it's about feeling of anger, but it is a feeling. And re, R-E, in front of sentire just means that it's repetitive. Re means again. I feel the anger again and again. All of you know that I do weekly and regular periodic workshops. And regularly, I hear from people who are 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old, about their resentments toward their mother and father. Resentments that are 10 years old or 30 years old or 50 years old, and the perpetrators, the mother and father, are long since dead, and individuals, you may be one of them, still has a fire in their belly about the mistreatment, physical or mental or emotional or financial or whatever it was. And the mistreatment and abuse is true. You were betrayed and you were abused. It is true. But it's ancient history. Why are we still holding it? Resentments from current and or past partners or significant others. The same comments. Even if it was yesterday or last week, quite frankly, by anybody's standards, it's ancient history. Resentment for me is a reaction of anger that's held, and I don't know what the time frame is, but I would suggest longer than 24 hours. That's not in any documents. That's just my wet finger in the wind appraisal. Anger it's a normal instinct. Fight, flight, and freeze for our safety, for our survival. Normal, healthy, nothing wrong with that. But if the anger turns into resentment, then it's a cancer in our soul. If the fear turns into anxiety, then there's cancer in the soul. If the hiding, camouflage, freeze response lasts longer than a day, that shame, that's the feeling as I've named it, of the freeze instinct, is a cancer of the soul. I'm talking about unhealthy shame. We're focused on resentments, but I'm giving you the bigger picture of the full scope of the step 4 inventory. Are you willing to change? Are you open to change? Are you willing to be opened by the Spirit, that divine surgeon? Yeah, you will not control it. And in fact, control is a delusion anyway. What's your invitation today? Let's stay right here in the present, not for yesterday, not for tomorrow, but right now, here today, for these next few moments that we're together, moments by anybody's definition. You see, these resentments are the bondage. Bill uses that term, the bondage of self. There's pathetic Herbie. 4 years sober, thinking he's a Renaissance man, and he's completely out of touch with his reality. And he's blaming this is true, blaming his father, 12 years dead at that point, 1988. He's blaming his wife. He's blaming his bosses. He's blaming the institutions that he's attempted to get education from, and by his standards, they failed him. 4 years sober, going to a meeting every day, calling a sponsor every day, going to book studies and step studies. And I don't know that I don't know, except that I'm a victim. Bill says we walk through a spiritual arch. So I've put it into actually a form here. He doesn't tell us that the arch's foundation is step one, but he assumes it. Step one being complete defeat. He assumes it because in step two, he says step two is the cornerstone. So I can build this arch that he gives us the initial components of by reading between the lines. Step two is my willingness, page 47. And he says it's the cornerstone, that first stone placed on the foundation that sets the direction of the entire arch. And step three, he says, is I think it's on page 60, between 60 and 63, someplace in there. He says it's the keystone. That is the stone in the arch that holds the entire arch together, that decision to turn. A commitment. That decision to turn, that's a commitment expressed in prayer and in public witness of prayer, because he says we pray it with somebody else. There's no action in step three. Step three is not surrender. Surrender's not in the big book. Notice in foundation, step one is complete defeat. Surrender would belong there. Step three is not passive. It's a ferocious act of my will to decide to turn, to commit to being turned by doing steps 4 through 9. Step three is not an action except the prayer, but it's a commitment to action. What's the action? Step 4, to do resentments. That's the first out of the box. And Bill spends the most time giving us instructions on how to unpack our resentments so that we not only understand them, but we also have an experience of naming them and talking about them and analyzing them to get from the smoke to the fire, from the consequences to the source. And some of that will help diminish and or even remove the resentments by naming it and talking about it and writing about it. But then he says, and in the final analysis, just look at page 66. We'll look at it more deeply as we go into it today. But he says, essentially, we're as powerless over removing our resentments as we are over dealing with our addiction. No, he says it. I'm paraphrasing. I'll give you the exact words on page 66, halfway through our time today. We're as powerless over our resentment as we are over our addiction, having no power at all. And I've come now from my experience of each of the steps and my knowledge of each of the steps and my interpretation of each of the steps to see that that applies to each of the steps. Certainly step 1, I'm powerless. That's the whole point. And if you want to have a new experience, find a new word, because powerless is so oft repeated by ourselves and other people that we become brain dead to it. My favorite phrase as a synonym for powerless is no choice. It doesn't get any more black and white. I do not have a choice over whether I drink or not, whether I stop or not, whether I stay stopped or not. I have no choice. That's the whole point of the first half of the first step. But then, if you've been exposed to me at all, you've heard my interpretation of, because of the people that helped me with the step work, of unmanageability, dash. The dash is not an and. I'm as powerless over my unmanageability as I am over alcohol. Read page 62, the end of that second paragraph. That's what Bill says. Our self-centeredness, which is the fire underneath the problems of unmanageability, is selfishness and self-centeredness. And then he says, and I'm quoting, we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. Spend some time with that. We can't even reduce our unmanageability, our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power, even working the steps, even praying. I'm as powerless over my unmanageability as I am over my addiction, having no power at all. And that's where he introduces us to step 3, a power. Step 3 being a decision for a relationship with that power. The whole point of the step process is power, to become empowered. Well, we also look at fear, not today, but at some point you will, if you've done the 4th step, or if you're doing the 4th step, or if you want to do the 4th step, you'll have to take a look at the flight instinct translated into the emotion of fear and unpack that, and take a look also at that 3rd component of step 4, the sex inventory. And you'll note from the 9 questions on page 69 that there's no question there about sex in the sense of genital sex, although the subject is genital sex. There's no question in those 9 questions. It's all about our motive. It's all about our impact on others. It's all about our violation of our own principles. Question number 9, what should I have done instead? This 4th step changed my life, 1988, 4 years sober. I happened to take then, because I had really good guidance, experienced wisdom people that were guiding me on the path, I looked at Dishonesty and Secrets, a commentary for another day. And I finished my 5th step, and I found freedom. That's the whole point of walking through the spiritual arch. Read the promises on page 75. The promises of the 5th step, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. What an image. Walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe as we go through the arch to freedom. Freedom from our addiction. I'm spending some time on this because step 4 is a soul crusher. The Oxford group called it soul surgery. It's not a walk in the tulips. It's hard work and it's embarrassing. So we need to keep the motive in front of us. What motive? Coming from the Latin movere. What moves us? What will draw us through? It's either the hot poker of suffering, the stick, or the magnetic draw of freedom, the carrot. Either one will work. Combination of both is most effective. I want to escape my suffering, but I also want to be living in the light. That's freedom. Notice pathetic Herbie's still in jail of his own making, but at the end of the 4th step, especially at the end of the 5th step, I realized that I was the one that was holding the bars in front of my face. There's no wall, there's no ceiling, there's no floor. Those bars are not connected to anything except my 2 hands. I'm a victim of Herb. Circumstances and people no longer held me in bondage. I was able to drop the bars. one of the authors that Hazelton has published the book, was called Drop the Rock for steps 6 and 7. Exactly. But here's an image that I really enjoy because it communicates the purpose of the 4th step. Bill says ego deflation at depth. We all have genetics that comes from our biology and our family tree. Notice the image here is of the Russian doll. You've seen them. They're called nesting dolls. A Russian lady in one of my workshops told me that the word is matrushka, describing these dolls encapsulated in each other. I just put at the top of the PowerPoint, this is my story. I was born, and then I was born into a family culture. It may be a normal family culture, meaning father and mother, or it may be adopted, or it may be whatever your culture was that was the family that supported you to survive your early childhood. That begins to create the story. Notice that the image doesn't change. The doll's face, the persona, the mask stays the same, but underneath that, there's some dynamics that are very unique to you. My story. It continues with your emotions outside of your family. It continues with the information that you get outside of your family. And it all covers up your true self. That's the psychologists talk about that today, based on their science, as well as if you look at organized religion, the Buddhists have a wonderful approach to the true self and the false self. But that's the whole point of the step 4 process, is to remove the Hollywood stage front of the masks, the persona. So Bill asks us to make a list. I asked you at the beginning to note 1 or 2 or 3 areas of resentment or anger or disturbance or annoyance. Who annoys you? Who disturbs you? And what are the reasons? Those are columns 1 and column 2 on page 65 in the big book. Very straightforward. Bob was my co-worker. You've heard me talk about Bob, who tried to get me fired. I was there 20 years and he had organized a posse to get me fired. Bob, and he tried to get me fired. It's really straightforward. But column 3 is about my beliefs. I didn't know that until this man helped me. It's not a checkbox. Bill doesn't give us any definitions of the words he uses on page 64 and 65. He just gives us the words, self-esteem and pride, etc. We'll be looking at those specifically. The man who took me through the work gave me a definition and how to apply it. At the end of it, I saw it was about my beliefs, those areas of should. That's a short circuit way, a very effective way of coming to understand what your beliefs are. When you say, life should, I should, you should, we should, they should. Every one of those is revealing to you possibly a belief that you have, and that those are the lenses through which we look. Like I'm looking through my glasses right now. They've been ground to be 20/20 vision. Without my glasses, I would have some distorted view of what I'm looking at. But I wouldn't know that I have a distorted view if I've never had a clear view. I had a distorted view of reality. I had a distorted view of myself. I had a distorted view of you because I had never had clear lenses through which to look. And column 3 began to grind my lenses through which I look. See, the catch-22 here is I'm looking through the lenses that are distorted. I'm looking through the lenses at life and trying to unpack it, and I'm looking through distorted lenses, so I'm condemned to never unpack it. I need to look through the lens at the lens so that I can begin to understand the distortions and begin to have those distortions changed by regrinding the lenses or getting, as Chuck C. would say at the title of his book, a new pair of glasses. That final piece I call column 4. It's not on page 65. There are 3 columns there, although they're not named columns. That's the graphic look of it. They look like they're in columns. So I call them columns 1, 2, and 3 on page 65. The second paragraph on page 67 is the final paragraph that gives us the final instructions on completing the resentment inventory. In there, it uses my role, my fault, where am I to blame? Some of those words I don't like, so I put down, where am I responsible for generating my resentment? I'm not responsible for my drunken father. I'm not responsible for my father's abuse of me. Emotional and verbal. There was never physical abuse. But I am responsible today for my reaction to yesterday. I hope you hear that. That's not subtle. What happened yesterday is true. Yesterday meaning 40, 50, 60 years ago, or a week ago, or 24 hours ago. I'm not responsible for what people do, and I'm not responsible for its impact on me. Please be clear on that. But I am responsible for my reaction to it. What a distinction that is. It's not subtle once you experience it. So let's take a look at column 3, self-esteem. The man who took me through this step said self-esteem is about who you are, who you believe you are. Notice that's the word at the top, belief. Who do I believe I am? This is not about low self-esteem or high self-esteem. He said, put yourself on a stage. This is a very wonderful, effective technique for breaking the code of having the curtain part so that I can see the truth. And that is put myself on a stage with the person with whom I have a resentment. I'm on a stage with Bob, my coworker, who's trying to get me fired. Who am I? Well, my belief about who I am here at age 48, 4 years sober, and I'm 20 years in this work, and I've had this relation, not this work, my career work, and I have this relationship with this man who's also a senior vice president like I am. He's been with the company 20 years like I am, but he doesn't like me, and the background's not important. I'm on the stage with Bob, and I see myself as a very competent employee making a wonderful contribution historically to the company. And in fact, I'm the best salesman that they have. That's my self-esteem, my evaluation, my belief about who I am. Because I completely disregard my 17 years of drinking of those 20 years and all the chaos that caused. Because now I'm sober 3 years. I haven't changed, but I don't know that I haven't changed, and I don't know that change is necessary. I just have this false perception, this delusion about who I am, and that's who I am on a stage with Bob, and I resent his looking at me, and he looks down at me, and he thinks I'm inadequate, incompetent, and I'm a cancer in the organization, and they need to fire me. Well, you can see where there's a conflict. I'm the best employee that they have, and he says I'm the worst employee that they have. Now, I'm not saying he's a healthy and he has an accurate perception, not one bit at all. But this is the conflict, because I am holding this belief about who I am. Bill uses the term pride. He doesn't give us a definition for it. So this man who took me through the steps gives me a definition. On a stage, I'm standing there looking at Bob, but there's an audience in the theater. See, the drama, the theater, this is Bill's, one of his models and metaphors that he uses throughout the book. How do my co-workers view all of this? How do I want my co-workers to see Bob treating me? It sounds a little complicated. It's not. Put yourself in the audience. You're looking at Bob. You're looking at me. And how do I, on the stage, want you to see Bob treating me ideally? Well, I want them to see Bob treating me with respect. And this man said to me, is that all you want? Stretch it, Herb. Be outrageous. Go way beyond common vocabulary and even civilized expectations. What do you really want the audience to see Bob treating you? Well, respect, sure, but how about obedience? How about obeisance? How about that when he walks into a room where I'm at, he steps back and bows his head in respect, and maybe even bows his body in respect. And he's overwhelmed in the grandiosity and the elegance of who I am, honored to be in my very presence. I stretched it. I was uncomfortable stretching it until I looked at it and go, yeah, no, that's really what I would like. And this man said, well, you have a little king down inside of you, don't you, Herb? First time I'd ever had it. I'm not the Renaissance man. I'm a Neanderthal. I hadn't those quotes yet, but I would eventually as a result of doing the balance of the work. How do I want the audience to see Bob treating me? Ideally by me, by my standards. You know, it's no accident that Bill, in the lead up to the third step, says we have to quit playing God. And that's what we're doing. Oh, we probably don't name it that way. We wouldn't be that grandiose, most of us. But when you come right down to it, we're trying to control. We're trying to control other people. We're trying to control circumstances. We're even trying to control ourselves. We're the center of our life, yes, but we also want to be and believe we are at some point the center of life itself. We have a script. Bill writes it, pages 60 to 62. If you haven't read those pages, 60 to 62, and made it personal, meaning yourself, read it out loud, making it personal and present tense, pages 60 to 62, I mean, it will be very embarrassing, but very revealing, because it's all about manipulation. I'll be nice to you if, in fact, you cooperate. But if you don't, and I really have some energy about it, I'll be mean to you. That's what he says, that manipulation. Because I want what I want when I want it, and how I want it, and how often I want it. A lot of times we're not conscious of any of that. It's just the way we're operating because we're asleep, dreaming that we're awake. A line that was given to me by a philosopher, a Russian philosopher. He said, most human beings are asleep, dreaming that they're awake. 48 years old, 4 years sober, I'm asleep. I don't know that I don't know. I can't see that I don't see. What about life? Life should. Life should. I have a script. I don't know that I have a script. But I have in my head the model of what a father is, a model of what a husband is, a model of what a wife is, a model of what a woman is, a model of how things should be. And it's all BS. Delusional. It's not real. That whole level of emotional sobriety that most of you know that I'm involved in for the last 3 to 5 years with Dr. Berger is about seeing reality as reality is, not as I want it to be. Reality just is. As one of my workshop participants said, in a moment of ecstasy because of a breakthrough realization, Herb, reality is not personal. It just is. Oh my God, I hope every one of us can have that experience and hold that experience. Reality just is. Don't take it personally. All right. So there's a worksheet in the Way of Life document. Oh, I'll show it to you here. I'm not going to go through it because it would take too long. And I don't want it to be, but I want to help you with that. So that's the worksheet that's in the Way of Life document. I take these 7 words from the Way of Life, from the big book in the matrix on page 65. They're in a different order, but self-esteem, I've talked about. What is my deep belief about who I am? And then the prompter is I am. It's never negative because it's not about psychological self-esteem, low or high self-esteem. It's about what do I believe? Here I'm on the stage with whatever, mother, father, partner, employer, whatever the opportunity is. And then Bill gives us next to each one of those words, he puts fear next to some of them. This man suggested that I ask, what do I fear next to each one of them? I want Bob to treat me like I'm the king and he's the servant. What's my fear is he'll see through my projection of who I am and disrespect me. That was the first crack in my armor when I asked the fear question, because it began to reveal to me underneath that my grandiosity was in fact a cover for my low self-esteem. Pride. How do I want other people to see me, and what's my fear? Ambition. What do I want? It's very straightforward. And I wanted to be promoted to run the LA office. I was one of 3 candidates that was being considered. My fear is I wouldn't get the job. It's very straightforward. It's not very analytical. Self-esteem and pride are very analytical. It challenges us in ways that perhaps we've not been challenged before to take a look at ourselves and our belief about ourselves. Security, number 4, is different than ambition. Ambition is what do I want? Security is what do I need? I want power, ambition, but I need not to be evaluated. I want to be the boss because I don't want local accountability. I don't want anybody looking over my shoulder. I'm afraid they'll see what I'm unwilling to see even in myself. Personal relations. What is my model about bosses in the workplace. The next item is entitled sex, but this man said, because there's a third component in step 4 that is actually about genital sex, and it's a 1/3 of the step 4 inventory, perhaps this question under the resentment evaluation is not about sex itself. I mean, this is an interpretation. It's about gender. What are my beliefs about men? What are my beliefs about women? What are my beliefs about fathers? What are my beliefs about sons? What are my beliefs about bosses? Oh, how about male bosses versus female bosses? I discovered 1988 that I had some prejudice that I didn't realize I had about women in the workplace. You see, the prompter there is a real or ideal or model man, or a real or ideal or model woman. See, I have these templates in my head that I don't know that I have. I've acquired them either from my family or from my training or from my character deficiencies, wherever they have come from. I've got templates in my head about life, about people, about myself. And they're normally very delusional and warped. Pocketbook is about money, of course, unless it's not. In this case, it was with the workplace. It was about money, but it was also about power. It was also about me getting what I wanted. Nobody should get in my way. My fear is everybody's getting in my way. The bondage of self again. We're going to stop here, and I'm going to stop in terms of my teaching on it and ask you to ask any questions that you might have on it. And I would like to help you unpack something that perhaps you're stalled out on, or you have a question about, or you have some confusion of. I'd love to confirm and or clarify whatever you are thinking about the approach to this work. And if you are willing to go through maybe the template that I have that's been shown on the PowerPoint, or you might have it in the Way of Life document. That's page 23 in the Way of Life document, which is on my website. Happy to help in whatever way we have, and we'll have some discussion about that for probably about 15 minutes. And at the very least, you'll have a taste of this approach, and at the very most, you might have an experience with it.
Hi, Herb. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, you talked about stretching it, and do you want us to stretch it all the way down? So not only the self-esteem.
No, it wasn't my experience to stretch it. The self-esteem and the pride are like, thank you for asking the question, because it expands the approach. And that is, self-esteem and pride are like the flip sides of the coin. Self-esteem is how I see myself. Pride is how I want you to see me. But we're all looking at me.
Yeah.
And so it's the same coin, just 2 different sides. And once I get that clear, then each of the other things sort of cascades down from that. So the stretch really needs to come. I do believe it was helpful to me in the self-esteem especially, but also in the pride. And nothing is unreasonable.
Okay.
Yeah, just like be as outrageous as your courage allows you to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. That's helped in the past too.
Yeah.
And then I always get stuck on, it really helps when you said never negative, but when you say, what is my deep belief about who I am, it tends to go towards the negative.
But that's the psychological self.
Okay.
And here's my classic example of that. If if I were to say, I believe that I'm worthless. In fact, I'm lower than whale shit, is what I've heard in a meeting. And it's kind of like, oh, that's gross, but it's literally very a picture. And you treated me like whale shit, then I would say you're particularly astute in your perceptions.
Okay.
But I don't react that way. I have an anger toward you for treating me this way, which means I don't believe it at all.
Okay.
But I don't know what I believe. I don't know that I have this core here belief about myself that I don't deserve that, because there's a psychology or an emotion that's been layered over by our family or by our early childhood experiences that has smothered me into the sort of the consciousness that in fact I'm worthless.
Right.
But underneath, I'm rebellious. That's why I have the anger.
Okay. We would be at peace if they were treating us exactly how we believed we should be.
Bam.
Got it. Okay.
Say it
Great.
again, please. But say it again, please, because that's very clear.
We would be at peace if we were being treated the way we believed we should be treated.
That's right. And the very fact that we're not at peace, that we're disturbed, means that we don't accept this.
Okay.
We have this healthy instinct in us at the very core of our reality. That's why that final phase of the deflation in the Russian dolls was the manifestation of the true self. We pull away all these masks that have been layered on us by society and our family and ourselves. All right. And we discover, oh, one of my teachers calls it the core of goodness. Yeah.
The fact that we haven't been standing up for ourselves, so to speak, is that where the spiritual malady is?
Exactly.
Okay.
If I'm emotionally predetermined of low self-esteem, that's my perception of myself, then in fact, I'm going to be reluctant to confront people who treat me that way. But my anger tells me that there's something in me that doesn't believe the truth of this or the appropriateness of this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. I'll just say once in the past, you said, going back to my first question about stretching it, you said, I want people in the room to stand up. When I come in the room, I want everyone to stand up and say, oh, great, Herb's here.
Right.
Like that's always really helped me write these out, because that's stretching it, but that's exactly how I would feel too.
Well, no, and I'll elaborate. Thank you for giving me back some of my memory. You know, in my fantasy, if I walk into a room, I want not only for them to stand up, I want them to catch their breath. He's here. And then when I walk in the room, I want the men to bow and the women to curtsy. I mean, yeah, you've heard me talk about it. It's kind of like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed, but that was in fact down deep in me.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Herb, I've got a question. It's the very same question that was just asked, the second one, but where it's a little bit different twist is when I do resentment on myself.
Oh, good. Excellent.
I have a really hard time on that. Okay.
Yeah. It's the most difficult one to do because we're subjective and we can't be objective about the subject because I'm the subject. So we need to get some skill, some competency in doing the worksheet on other people first. Once we have some traction, some experience with unpacking on other people, then it makes it a little easier for us to unpack it on ourselves. But it's a very, and Bill acknowledges that. He said on page 66, and so we had some regret or remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. So I believe it's very legitimate for the people who literally have some resentment toward themselves and their own history to do this third and fourth column on themselves, to kind of like get a sense of what the truth is. What's the balance here? Scrape away all the emotion and all the experiences, and underneath, where does this anger toward myself come from? And then once you identify the diagnosis, then in fact you can have the remedy for it. I'm going to stop. I'm just saying it's very legitimate. It's very helpful. It's very difficult.
But when my experience of when I'm doing it is, it says, you know, what do I believe? And I was putting down some negative things. I really was. Is that
Of course.
okay?
But let me just say this.
Okay.
It's never negative. Never negative. Now, when it's negative, what you're revealing to yourself is your psychological and or emotional self-esteem, low self-esteem. And that needs to be dealt with in therapy and or in some other way, but it's not your belief. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the anger. So try, and so for people who have that logjam of low self-esteem, and it almost makes it impossible to try to get to the truth of it, is I just say, really like force yourself not to be negative in terms of your belief, but try to understand. And thank you for asking this question, because it's going to reveal something that I hadn't talked about, which is a really nice technique and tool. The man said, if you can't get to self-esteem, circumvent it by going to the pride. How do I want other people to see me? And that might reveal the positive aspects of it. And then I can go and just name that as my belief. How do I want other people to see me? I want them to see me as fitting in. I want them to see me as competent. I want them to see me as likable, lovable. Oh, underneath that, maybe, just maybe, I'm likable. Maybe I'm lovable. Maybe I'm okay. Maybe I'm confident, because I want other people to see that. Maybe it's true. So then we start beginning to explore that. Oh, I've been layered over with all these emotions, so I can't actually even see the truth. Does that make sense, Cheryl? I'm so glad that you asked the question in the way you did.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Herb.
Yeah. Anybody who thinks that this is easy, it is not. Anybody who thinks it's too difficult, it is not. There's a place where you can navigate it, but you need an experienced person who has themselves broken the code to assist you along the line, so that can kind of confirm and clarify and help based on their experience for you to navigate it and have your own experience. Yeah.
So while we were there in treatment, we talked about step 4 in great depth, but I didn't get to do it with my team there. So I'm home now. I'm home for 8 months, and I did not want to start step 4 because of this fear of, I don't want to know these darker things about myself. Okay.
It's kind of like saying, gosh, I have this kind of spot on my lung, but I really don't want to know that it's cancer. Yep. Okay, you don't have to, but it's going to metastasize and kill you, whether you know it or not.
Okay. So now I'm working with my therapist here. And he's very experienced in this. He has his own story, but as we're doing it, it's not feeling like we're going to this degree of depth.
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels more like I'm filling out the worksheets.
I get it 100%.
So what would you recommend
Yeah.
I do to make this the experience it's sounding like today it could be?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Wonderful question. And continue work with your therapist. I'm sure that's going to be very productive, especially if you then get some supplemental help
Yeah.
from somebody who's in a 12-step program, who themselves has experience with these worksheets as I've laid them out. They're not my worksheets. They have come from the people who brought me through the steps, and they've been fine-tuned by the people in the workshops over the last 25 years. So, but you need somebody who's going to be experienced and help guide you through it, in addition to what you're receiving from your therapist. And then you bring that to your therapist, and it will be very productive.
Okay.
I've had maybe 4 or 8 someplace in there, both psychiatrists and psychologists ask me permission to use my worksheets in their personal therapy work.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in between
Because
sponsors.
it goes deeper.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm in between sponsors.
Yeah.
I had the best sponsor and she got hired by Guest House. So now there's, it's a good way to lose a sponsor. But
But why did you lose her?
well, because it becomes a conflict of interest because I'm still in continuing care.
There, I got it now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So as I'm finding a new sponsor, how quickly do I want to jump into this with someone new?
Well, how quickly do you want to be free?
Tomorrow.
Well, there's your answer.
Okay.
And because of the time difference, if you're in a 3-hour time difference, I'll cut you some slack on tomorrow. Otherwise, if you were in my time zone, I'd say this afternoon.
You got it. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, why would you wait? If in fact there's a resource that's going to help remove the cancer before it metastasizes, why would you wait?
I think it's a fear and a safety thing. I want to know the sponsor better before I start step
from a
forward.
personal standpoint, I absolutely agree. And you do have a responsibility to interview them and get a sense of, number one, that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And number two, that you can trust them.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with that. I'm not saying make a decision today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
I am saying begin the pursuit of looking for somebody to connect to.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And well, I'm glad that work was helpful. That's great.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible.
Well, that's why I spend my life doing this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. I mean, I've uncovered the secret.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would I not put it on a mountaintop?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, I went there hoping to get my life back, but
Yeah.
what I got was getting a life I never imagined. It's so much better.
I left the monastery after 7 years because I didn't find what I was looking for. I'm in AA dealing with addiction 4 years, and I discover what I was looking for. I mean, go figure.
Who would ever have guessed?
Well, exactly. Exactly.
It's, so I had this interchange with this person, and she accused me of something that she say this.
So you have a resentment.
So I have a resentment.
What's the resentment? What's the resentment?
Wait, I just want to finish this. That
No, I'm not looking for the story. All
I'm
right.
going to make it short. I'm going to make it short. Is that it's somebody told me that sometimes when you're really angry, it's because it's true, and you couldn't face that truth yet.
Sometimes.
I didn't know if I should say anything. I'm not really sure. I just
But you do have a resentment.
it's a disturbance.
Mm-hmm. All right. So who are you in this relationship with this person? You're on a stage with them.
Okay,
Who are
I-
you?
I thought I was a treasured sponsor for years. You know,
A
just like,
treasured sponsor, lovely, wonderful. And what's your fear? What fear comes up when you say, I'm the treasured sponsor?
that I'm the worst person in the world.
And it could be black and white like that. Absolutely. Explore the extremes. I agree. Explore the extremes. Okay. So if in fact people were watching you in your group, unbeknownst to you, they were watching you have this interaction with your sponsee, I'm assuming. How would you want them, ideally, to see this sponsee treating you?
I would hope they would see through it and see that something was going on for her, and she was kind of blaming everything on me. But I would be also not wanting them to turn how they think about me into now I'm in a much worse category.
Well, you would want them to see you as, I'm an outstanding sponsor, and she's just a mischievous sponsee who is delusional and having her own tantrum. That's how you would want them to see it. All right. What's your ambition? What do you want in that interaction?
I guess I wanted to go back to being treasured.
Yes, I want her to respect me at the very least and treasure me at the very most. Yeah. And what do you need and why?
Well,
Need.
I guess is it respect? I don't know. Is that wrong?
Okay. I need I need my sponsees to look at me with admiration. I don't know. I'm making it up. Does that work? No, it doesn't. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you need from your sponsees generally in terms of your own?
I mean, I guess if I generalize this in general, it could happen to any relationship. You like it when they love you and they really appreciate you, and then suddenly you've gone down to the bottom floor and you're like,
Oh, no, wait. I want their love and appreciation. That's
Okay.
what I need. No. And why do you need their love and appreciation?
I guess I've enjoyed that. I felt good when I had
All
it.
right. And when you talk like this, what's your fear underneath?
That I'm really not worthy.
There you go. There you go. That's beginning to open it up. All right. And let's see, where should I go from here? Kind of related to the personal relations. What about gender? Do you have what's your belief about women sponsees? Belief about women sponsees?
I don't know that. Again, I guess keep going back to that they appreciate you, that they
All right.
like being led. In a
All
way.
right, let's flip it. What's your vision of the ideal woman sponsor? How do you measure yourself against this template? What is the template?
I'm kind of at a loss for.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Ideal sponsor. Okay. I guess ideally I'd be hearing my higher power, and my higher power would be communicating through me to my sponsee, and my sponsee would be getting the guidance that she needed and would be helping her move forward in her recovery.
An ideal sponsor is very effective and has an authentic and vital, vibrant relationship with a higher power. And when I say it that way, what's your fear?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm shorting out. Sorry.
Okay. All right. No, you're on the spot and you know it. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like you get shut down after a bit. Yeah. And that's what we do in prayer. We look at this stuff and we challenge ourselves, and then we work with somebody who can help us be a sounding board for it so that we can kind of sort it out. Yeah. So now I'm going to back up just a little bit on where we started and now where we're at. So what's your experience with this dialogue and these questions and your introspection on it? What's your experience with this right now?
Well, this is pretty new, this format that you're.
Yeah. Oh, it's very new. Mhm.
So I don't have much experience with the way you're doing it.
Oh, no, I understand that, but you didn't hear my question. I said,
Okay.
what's your experience right now? I know you don't have
That
experience.
it's powerful and that it's getting down to some painful nerves.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Excellent. Anything else you want to share?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. No, but this is and it's a process. It took me 3 different efforts with this man who introduced me to this process. 3 different times I had to go back to him. The first time I got it about 50%, the second time about 75%, and the third time he said, okay, now go, you check with me once a week so that you stay clear and you don't get sort of off track, but you've both basically broken the code. So this is not but it's so worth it. Because somebody was talking about their therapist. I was in therapy. I've been in therapy off and on for a long time. And never once did I ever have the depth penetration. My own interpretation is penetrating the unconscious in the way that this work does. That surfaces underneath stuff that I was never conscious of. All the therapy in the world never led me to the grandiosity that I had that was a cover for my low self-esteem. Now, I knew that combination and that connection because of the therapy helped me then process what I was experiencing in sort of psychological terms so that I could really understand it from that standpoint. But I had the experience first.
I relate to the grandiosity, the the feeling that you want people to bow down before you, and I have that fantasy for sure. And I want to be recognized, and I want people just to love me, everybody, and so that's part of my grandiosity for the cover up for the low self-esteem that comes along with it. I'm just putting myself out here because I every time I do these 4 steps, I find that my resentments kind of surface in small ways, and I notice my annoyances. With the grocery clerk at the store, and I don't know if it's just I'm just more aware of it, or if it's because I think probably it's because I'm in this process. But the main reason why I'm talking now is because I am making my list, and I plan on taking hopefully, a very serious dive for the first time in a long time on this. And one of the people that I did a lot of therapy on over the years, and I did a couple 4 steps on, was my mother.
Yeah.
And she was the center of the universe in our house, and everybody was meant to please her, to please her needs, and nobody else's needs ever mattered. So I did a lot of work on that, and then I was making my list, and I was writing down some of the resentments I had on certain people, and I realized that I haven't completed that work on her. And she passed away last August.
Well, but whether or not she's around is irrelevant, because the feeling that you have is the only relevant thing.
Yeah. What I'm seeing is, what I'm starting to see is that that I thought I forgave her, and I think I have. But also what I'm seeing with my resentment is the pattern of when you have these disconnections or this dysfunction with certain people, that it's what I learned, it's learned behavior.
Absolutely. And that's what this process is relearning and reframing.
Yeah, and I've been aware of it over and over again, but I usually sometimes I don't notice it with certain people until I get into a lot of pain.
Normally that's why people do hard work, is that they are suffering. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a thing that is bringing me to this. I'm realizing that I've been running into situations, big or small. The bigger they are, the more the pain it is with certain individuals. But the work, I think I need to put my mother on the list again.
You think? Oh, you think?
Because she's tired. But my grandiosity tells me I want to be, it sounds like certain people get free of whatever issue they have with their parent, and they don't have to deal with it anymore.
Well, here's underneath, I think what you're not saying is, I feel like I should have, in fact, dealt effectively with my feelings for my mother, and I don't want to be disloyal to my mother, and all of it's in a mix, but I have this overriding sense that I need to do some work on my mother, and that overriding sense is, in fact, your invitation.
Exactly.
Right.
And then there's these relationships with my brother's on the list, and it's all connected because.
Well, and one of my teachers, and you've heard me say it, says, what we do any one place, we do every place. Your mother set the standard in a very gross and large way, and the pattern is merely a cookie cutter replication of your relationship with your mother.
Exactly. And I sort of know it, but this work,
you do.
Yeah, I do. Because
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work on it. But this work will I know in my gut, if I go through the process, which I'm going to do, I made the decision, that I'll see more clearly, and I'll get to a place of peace quicker.
Yeah.
So
First we have to name it and experience it. We're going to take a little break here in a minute, and after a couple more people, and then I'm going to talk about a very effective tool in the big book, in between column 3 and column 4, for getting rid of these deep resentments. A prayer practice that completely eliminated these deep resentments, and they've never returned.
Wow. I look forward to this journey.
Yeah. I mean, wow is really the only appropriate expression. It's kind of like, oh my God. Yeah.
And I can feel something. Yeah, I can't explain it, but thank you.
You will be able to explain it after you experience it fully.
This morning I watched on YouTube my 45-year-old son having lots of fun. He is recovered from drugs and alcohol 10 years. I broke out in tears of joy for him. Then I felt the resentment that I missed all his addicted years.
Yeah.
A mother having fun.
Yeah.
So then I conclude I'm still grieving.
Yeah.
Then I listen to all of this you're presenting.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the grieving process and the resentment healing process?
Yeah. The answer is yes. And yet they're a parallel process. The resentment unpacking is a specific process dealing with the emotion of anger, but many people in the workshop have used the column 3, column 4 and done different words other than resentment. They've unpacked sadness. They've unpacked grief. They've unpacked depression. They've unpacked regret, using different words, but using the dynamic of the process, because the process is essentially the same. The grieving process is a particularly, it's a quantified process that you could see in the Grief Recovery Handbook. A group of people put together that process, and it would be helpful to you to expose yourself to that information. But I'm so happy with your question, because it, in a creative way, expands the use of this 3rd and 4th column from just the resentment to any other human emotion that we might have. Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Well, I think it will be helpful. At the same time, you may need some experienced guide to help translate it. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, it's a wonderful question. Thank you for it.
This has been wonderful, really wonderful. And I still have, unfortunately, a resentment against my dad, who is hanging on. He's 98. Yeah. I've done this work with you in person in Silver Spring.
Oh, yeah.
I did it in I've forgiven him maybe like 5 years ago, way better. And I was pretty cool. And the last 5 years, I've just kind of been like furious. And I just worked on this in the fall. I did the 3rd and 4th column, my AWOL about it. And I feel like, I need to address him directly. And I just did this with my therapist. I just went through like, what do I really want to say to him? But it's really not about him. I know that there's some things I still need to say to him. But what I need to do is to heal this. And you just mentioned something about that, but it's all about how I feel. I know it's all about me. It's not about him. I get it, And what is hard too, is that he's got this sort of, when somebody's an abuser, they're often, they have this magic that they do with people. They're very, what do you call it? Like they have a spell. They cast spells on people. That's what I call it. Where he's charming. He's and he's an old guy who dresses nice still, like not fancy nice, but nice. And people really respect him. Like he has all these couple men who come as sons, bring him communion at home and whatever. And everybody thinks he's the greatest guy. And he's him. He's a predator. He's a sexual abuser. He's an alcoholic. He's a high functioning alcoholic, and he's really nasty in many ways, But anyway, long story. But he goes to church all the time, and now he's at church. Anyway, it's me. It's like I got to change, and I know that I don't help that much with my dad anymore. And I help my sister who takes care of him, but I don't help him directly that much, except for some meals, which is really more for her. So it's really hard. And I talk to him almost every day or every other day. He calls me or I call him. But I just feel like I can't be broken anymore about this shit. I just can't. I can't. And it's like I've been in a much better place. The pandemic put me into a harder place. But yeah. It's like, I got to say stuff before I went to my mom's grave. I finally found out that she fought back with affairs and I didn't know about it. It was like, this is great. Like finally my mother stood up. I'm like, this is great, but I've spoken to her at her gravesite, and this guy's 98 years old. I'm thinking, you're living, so you're waiting for me to come up and say this stuff and release this. I'm guessing. That's just my interpretation, my self-centered interpretation of why he's still alive. But anyway, he's getting good care.
All right. So I'm going to ask a question in a minute.
Sure.
But thank you for sharing I think we've got a full picture of it. Not the details, but when I looked up the word forgiveness in a dictionary, look at my hand. It was a decision to release them.
Yeah.
All right. And that's your role. That's your responsibility. As you know, in the resentment area, it's all about you. And you've acknowledged that. You've experienced that. The forgiveness process is really the same. A decision to release, not condone,
Right.
not accept, not put yourself in harm's way, but just to release this feeling that you have. And two resources for you, well, at least two. Number one, in my Way of Life document, there's a 3-page meditation on forgiveness that summarizes the process as I've experienced it, releasing my father, releasing Bob, releasing my wife, releasing the bosses I've ever had. And I got free as a result of this process. Column 3, column 4, and the rest of the 9th step amends. That's a bigger picture than we can discuss today. The second resource is a book called Forgive for Good by Fred Luskin.
Yep, I have it.
And well, read it. And if you've read it, read it again. It's coming from a psychological, scientific, no spirituality, no religion, nothing 12-step. He's a professor at Stanford, a scientist, totally secular, and he's been doing work on forgiveness, wrote his PhD dissertation on it 30 years ago, converted it to this book, and he's been doing it ever since. And from my standpoint, that's the second best book I've ever read because of its practicality. The first being the big book, because of its practicality. It's life-changing, the big book. And Fred Luskin's book is so supplemental to it because it comes at it strictly from a science standpoint. But not to be sophisticated, science that I'm not science trained or oriented, but I read it and it so complemented the work I did in the 12-step work. He and I, Fred Luskin, have done workshops together now, co-facilitated. There's about 2 of them, and they're on the YouTube, and we've got 2 more planned. Okay. So I would recommend that if you want to just have some fun with that, you're welcome to listen to my part, which is about steps 8 and 9, but certainly listen to Fred's part. And I think you get a sense of him and his personality. He's gentle, he's humble, he's informed. He just wants to really be helpful. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really want to send this 98-year-old man out with my love. I really do.
That's wonderful.
That's really what I want. That
yeah.
I want to be in that place, and yeah. I'm not there, and I really want to be.
And
I have to keep forgiving. I know it's an ongoing process, but I'm kind of like I'm at the point where I'm like, please, forever, let's do this.
And you might want to challenge and have discussion with your therapist. Are you going to get free at a cost to him?
Right.
And I don't think that would be a healthy thing.
No, that's not what I'm interested in.
Well, I don't want to interfere with the psychological therapeutic dynamic, whatever your therapist said, but my instinct is we don't get free based on hurting anybody else.
No, I know.
And in fact, that's what the 9th step says, doesn't it?
That's right.
We make amends unless to do so would hurt them or others.
Right. Yeah.
So God bless him. He's 98. He's probably done the best that he can.
Oh yeah.
And even though it's demented, delusional, and not good enough, it's really none of your business.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's none of what is your business is your feelings about it and your reaction to it. And what you said earlier, keep that as the lenses through which you look. I want to send him off with love. I think that's what you said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hello, Herb. Thank you for the work. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I have not worked on the step in these columns in several months, and it's just very, very humbling to be here today. You know,
Oh.
I'm, pardon?
What's humbling about being here today? That surprised me. I thought you were saying it was humbling to do the work, but humbling to be here today. Tell me about that.
It's humbling to be here today because I'm feeling like I've got the wrong 12-step group. I'm feeling like I've got the wrong therapist, the wrong couples therapist.
Oh.
I just need to step up my game. You talked about suffering and how suffering brings us to this work. I did something really dumb this week and I'm now suffering. I had a resentment against my stepdaughter who just got married in Aruba, and I got nothing from her for Mother's Day. I did flowers for her. We did the gift bags. We did a necklace for her that was engraved. I mean, this is my reaction to her indifference to everything that we did is my suffering. And I just wanted to say that here. And I just relate to so many of the people today. And I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, you've heard it probably in meetings. Our expectations are resentments under construction.
Oh my goodness. For sure. Resentment in advance, right?
Yeah, we're building it. Yeah.
An expectation is a
Yep. Yep. Now she may be very insensitive and disrespectful and clueless and socially awkward. It may be, but that's not your problem. What your problem is you're
No.
reacting because you have a story about how daughters-in-law should be, especially after you have been such a wonderful mother-in-law. Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think we were frozen. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Was I frozen or were you frozen? Did you hear what I said?
I heard you say that I am the stepmother and I should be treated in a certain manner. And then
That's your expectation. That's your story.
Yeah.
If she doesn't live up
Yes.
to your story, you get angry.
Oh, yes.
But it's your story.
I get angry and.
But wait, but it's your story.
Exactly.
And your story is a delusion. It's stuff that you made up.
Yeah. That's what my sponsor said this week.
Then you have the right sponsor.
She said, you're creating stories and then believing them.
Yep. Yep. That's what we do. All of us, we all do it. Yeah. Until we have the breakthrough. Dr. Berger's book on emotional sobriety talks about that we're dealing with our story, and emotional sobriety is merely seeing reality as it is, not the story that we make up about it.
Right. Okay. Reality as it is.
It's
I think the story that I make up is I've been doing recovery for so long that I shouldn't have any anger and fear and suffering and resentment anymore.
Exactly. I can see the halo above your head.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Saint Stephanie.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great that you can smile. It's great that we can have a sense of humor about being so human. All right, I'd like to begin again. And I'm going to talk now about the prayer practice that I introduced just in summary form. After Bill talks about column 3 in the big book on page 65, I'm going to get it here. He says, we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. Well, clearly, you're not finished with your third column. We're doing a laser focus kind of deep look at, but not necessarily deep work with the material. The first thing apparent was that the world and its people were often quite wrong. It's true. It's true. That's how my meditation on forgiveness starts out. You were abused. You were betrayed. You were hurt. You were abandoned. It is all true. It is all true. Whatever it is that you have as your history, it's all true. That is correct. But it is history. And now you're being invited to release it and heal from it. Because your problem today is not your history. Please hear this. Your problem today, as you've heard many people share about their fathers and mothers, their problem today is not their history. It's our reaction today to our history. That's the only problem. And the translation of that is what Bill says here. So our troubles are of our own making on page 60, I believe it is. So our troubles are of our own making because it's our reaction to yesterday. It's our reaction to our history. It's our reaction to today. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Columns 1, 2, and 3. Oh yeah, I'm a victim. I mean, we were victimized. I don't want to diminish that, demean that. We were a victim. But today, we're not a victim. Except we victimize ourselves. And that's the whole point of column 4. To get a clear sense and experience. I am not the victim, I'm the perpetrator. I don't have a part in my resentment. Please don't use those words. I don't have a part. I have the whole thing. I am responsible for my resentments. I don't have a part in it. Whose anger is it? It's my anger. What percentage of it is my anger? Oh, that would be 100%. That's why Bill he doesn't use the term part, he uses the term role. What's my role? I use the term, what's my responsibility? But then on page 66, he goes on, it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment, deep resentment. So he's making the distinction. When I first did this work, I had 85 resentments. But 7 or 8 of them were deep resentments. Bob, of course, my father, my mother, my wife, and 4 bosses. I had deep resentments about those. I mean, they went down to the bone. The rest were 12-ounce salmon or 30-pound barracuda. But I was dealing with 2,000-pound white shark when I talk about deep resentment. And Bill suggests here, we saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? Please hear this line, the last line in the last full paragraph on page 66. So many times it's misunderstood, mostly, but take a look at it. We could not wish them away, these deep resentments, any more than alcohol. Translate that. We're as powerless over our deep resentments as we are over alcohol. He invites us to pray. But notice, in contrast to what you hear in meetings, and you hear wonderful spiritual stuff, pray for them, pray that they get the best in what they want, pray for them, they get the best of what you want, and then pray for their healing. Wonderful, wonderful spiritual practices. But it's not the instruction in the big book. Please pay attention to the words in the big book, page 67. We ask God, that's an invitation to prayer. Anytime we're talking to God, whatever that means to you, anytime we're talking to God, that's prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. We are not praying for the object of our resentment. We ask God to help us. We're praying for ourselves. We're praying for our own healing. We're praying, inviting the divine surgeon to bring the spiritual scalpel, to remove the deep hurt, the deep resentment, the deep cancer in us, to remove that from us. I can't. I've named it, I've analyzed it, I've talked about it. That may have minimized it, but it didn't remove it. And I'm asking you, Holy Spirit, sacred power, sacred force, to come in, remove that cancer from me and heal me. The prayer is in the Way of Life document. I'm going to bring it up just so that you can see what it looks like, not necessarily copy it. That's up to you. First of all, we identify the deep resentments. What are they? If you have a long list of resentments, not all of them are deep, as I say, at the soul level. But you may be able to identify, as some people have, mother and father and or significant partner or ex-partner relationship. Begin this prayer practice only if you want freedom. If you want to keep your deep resentment, do not do what I'm suggesting. I say that in tongue in cheek. And here's the prayer. God, Dad, like me, is a spiritually sick person. That's the unpacking of the material on page 66 and 67. Most of this prayer comes from those words with some interpretation. Help me to show Dad tolerance, compassion. Bill uses the term pity. I don't like the term. It might have been a good term back in 1939 when the big book was written, but I don't believe today it's a helpful word. So I use the term compassion and patience. Release me from being angry. You see, I'm looking for healing. Enable me to release this resentment. That's my role. Remove this resentment. That's the invitation of healing. Show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view of Dad or Bob or my wife. Bring me to accept reality as it is. That's a new line that I've added based on my exposure to and experience with emotional sobriety. Bring me to accept reality as it is. Not how I want it to be, not how I think it ought to be, but how it is. And show me how I can be helpful. That final phase of the step 10 recommendation. Turn your thoughts to someone you can help. Thy will be done. I think that's the most effective and simple prayer there is. With my free will, I'm saying I want to be in alignment with the flow of reality. I want to be in alignment with God's will. I want to be in alignment with life. That prayer is in the Way of Life document on page 24. In my website, you're welcome to download any aspect of that. I recommend it. And here's the practice. I had a list of 8 people. I prayed the prayer specifically, one at a time, for the removal of the resentment for each person. God, Bob, like me, that was my coworker. God, Mary, that was my wife, like me. And I prayed the prayer. Now, at that time, when I first was exposed to this, I prayed a single prayer, one for each person every day. Therefore, I prayed 8 prayers. I had 8 deep resentments, and I prayed 8 separate prayers, one for each. Some people have modified that based on what they can do or are willing to do, and they take it one at a time so that they have their list, but they only pray 1 prayer every day, or they pray 3 prayers every day, one for 3 different people. And then when one is removed, they replace it with another person until the entire list has been taken care of. Here's what's happened. I prayed 8 for 3 months on a daily basis. I was trusting the suggestion that my step guide had given me, and that what Bill had said in the big book. I was trusting it. I wasn't experiencing any relief. I wasn't experiencing any freedom. I was not experiencing any forgiveness. But I prayed each day 8 separate prayers. About 3 months into it, I was aware when I prayed that morning that there was no negative energy around one of them. Wow. It was gone. The resentment, the anger, the energy, the negativity, it was gone. I mean, like there was no hint of mint. So the next day I prayed the 7 prayers. And of course, they melted. Well, not of course, but that's why I'm sharing this. It's about so effective. They melted away like spring snow. Over the next several weeks, I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't very long. Over several weeks, the 7 went to 6, went to 5, etc., until they disappeared. Now, here's the really good news. 3 years later, when I did this step work again, not one of them, not one of these resentments returned. Nothing. And they have never returned since then. I have had new annoyances and or irritations, little tiny, not resentments. In 2008 or 9, I forget exactly when, I realized I was having a particular resentment with a new circumstance and people that had come up. And I took pause, as somebody mentioned, and I did a laser focused written column 3, column 4 on that particular set of resentments. There were 2 or 3 people involved. And I spent some time doing the 5th step through the 9th step, completing the work, laser focused on them. It took a couple of weeks to get it done. And those were removed. I mean, literally removed, and they've never come back. See, what we're talking about here is freedom. Freedom from this negativity, freedom from this anger, freedom from these resentments, freedom from this reaction. That's why I completely endorse somebody who said, I want to do grief through this process. Absolutely. Sadness, regret, remorse, depression, even fear or anxiety. Absolutely. I'm not saying avoid medication. I am not saying avoid professional help with therapy. I'm not. In fact, include them where they're necessary and called for. But don't overlook this spiritual practice, a very, very powerful practice of removing these negativities from ourselves and from the lenses through which we're looking. Once we do that, I'm going to go on now with the 4th column. I call it the 4th column because it's the final instructions on page 67, the 2nd paragraph, rounding out the resentment recommendation from Bill. And it's not in the order that he gives it in the book. What am I thinking? I define selfish, that word he uses, as thinking about myself. What am I doing? I define the word self-seeking. He doesn't define either of the words. So I have to give it I want to give it a definition so that I can deal with it. The difference between selfish is that that's thinking, and self-seeking, that's about doing, that's about behavior. How are my feet moving? What am I thinking is really about my thoughts and my feelings and my imagination and my memory, all of those things that are immaterial, but within us, within our consciousness. What am I doing? That's translating it into action. How are my feet moving? What is my fear? As I asked in the third column, next to every of the 7 variables that Bill gives us, the words self-esteem, pride, etc., he suggests that we put fear, and my step guide suggested that we do fear on all 7, which helped me crack open an additional meaning of the evaluation of self-esteem and pride, etc. When I asked the fear, it was usually the opposite of my belief, which allowed me then to see another dimension of my belief when I looked at the fear of my belief not being true. Where am I dishonest? Very straightforward. Where am I not being transparent? Where am I trying to manipulate the truth? Where am I trying to manipulate other people? Selfish, self-centered. You see, every one of these questions has as its root what Bill talks about on page 62, selfish and self-centered. And I can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on my own power. And the 5th question is about responsibility. As I mentioned, I don't use the word that Bill uses in terms of blame. I use the word role and or responsibility. This is the worksheet, and you can see that it's much broader than the 5 questions. In fact, it has some questions about harm there, 6 and 7. I've included those because when we get in the big book to step 8, and it says make a list of the harms that we've done, we did so when we took inventory. I'm honoring that suggestion, having now in retrospect some experience with the 4th through the 8th step. I found that looking at the harm done to the person with whom I have a resentment and the harm done, question number 7, to the people around that resentment allowed me to see the negative impact of my resentment. Sometimes my resentment led to harm for other people, but they're not necessarily connected. You hear all the time misinformation in the rooms that if you've got them in your resentment inventory, that they need to be on your 8th step. That's just not true. It may be true if you created harm, but my behavior is not the harm. More about that when we get to step 8 and 9. As I mentioned, I'm doing the resentment inventory quarterly now this year because I think it's so important. I'm also quarterly doing a workshop on steps 8 and 9 because they're equally important and transformative. These are the 2 areas that I can identify that I had my specific spiritual awakening. Step 4, the resentment inventory, column 3 and 4. I can look back on it and see that I began to wake up. But that waking up wasn't complete until I finished the 8th and 9th step. That forgiveness process, that healing wasn't complete until I finished the 8th and 9th step. Both of those areas, step 4 on the one hand, step 8 and 9 on the other hand, are the 2 biggest areas of transformation as I've experienced it. And so I found that holding the questions about harm here are important in the preparation for the 8th step, as well as the realization of the dimensions of the impact of the resentment inventory. And then in step 8, just trying to pick up any other fears that might be in addition to, supplemental to the question in number 4. I had a fear of really smart people. They intimidated me. I had a fear of public humiliation. I had a fear of being wrong. All of those had not come out up until that point, and they were all grist for the mill for the next piece of work in the step 4 inventory, as I mentioned in my opening comments, that arch through which we walk to new freedom. One of the building blocks is resentment. The other in the step 4 inventory is fear. And the last one in the big book is about our sexual behavior. So I then go to the question number 9 in my worksheet is about character defects, which is a preparation for step 6, of course, naming our character defects. I found that it was added over time with the workshop feedback because it made the column 4 more effective when I was able to list the character defects that I was becoming aware of: grandiosity, lack of consideration, all of the various aspects of narcissism, which I had up to that point been completely clueless to. But it began to be revealed to me. Very embarrassing, but also very therapeutic and humbling, as people have mentioned in their own sharing today. Number 10 is really an interesting question. Why do I hold on to this resentment? What's the motive? What's the benefit? What's the value? People's very quick reaction to the question, because they don't really hear the question, is, oh, no, this is totally negative. There's no benefit. There's no value. Well, Sam, you've been holding it for 40 years, this resentment toward your father. It must have some value. Otherwise, you wouldn't be holding it. Oh, well, yeah, you're right. If I have a resentment, meaning a negative feeling of anger that's over 24 hours, let alone 24 years, it must be serving a purpose. What's the purpose? What is the benefit I'm getting out of it that I'm not even aware of? A great question. And it may not be obvious. It may need prayer and conversation. But at the top, I've asked people to confirm what, coming out of the column 3, what their perceived role is. You can see at the top of the worksheet, like an actor in a play. I'm a misunderstood person. I'm a betrayed spouse. I'm an abused child. Whatever the connotation is of the story, coming out of the 3rd column is always going to be a variation on a theme of being a victim. Always. I am a victim, therefore I have anger. Although historically I was victimized 10 years ago, today I still have the feeling, because I have the active anger, that I'm being victimized today. It's not true. But the trauma at various levels, maybe scale of 1 to 10, the trauma is so severe that in fact, I have the perception that I'm an abused child. I'm 47 years old, but I'm an abused child. And quite frankly, this evaluation begins to expose the lie. As it says at the top, the motives. The answer to question number 10. As long as I stay a victim, I'm not responsible. As long as I stay a victim, I can blame my father. As long as I stay as a victim, I don't have to grow up. Those are some of my reasoning, some of my responses. So rather than being an abused child, or in Bob's case, a misunderstood employee, that was my perceived role coming out of the 3rd column. Bob did not understand me. My real role at the bottom for holding these negative feelings, I realized that he understood me completely. Now, there were some aspects of it, of course, that he misread because he was very dysfunctional. But my real role is that I was in the Neanderthal, that I was a self-appointed, grandiose, unrealistic, self-serving, etc., etc. And that I was fully responsible not only for my reaction to Bob, but it explained a lot of the reaction of Bob and other people like him because I was such a jerk, and I'm being kind. So the perceived role and the real role is the turnaround. Byron Katie, Loving What Is, comes at it at this same process, but not from 12-step vocabulary or spiritual vocabulary or religious vocabulary or psychological experience. She comes at it from her own personal experience. Byron Katie, Loving What Is. Once you're doing this work, I think it's a wonderful supplement to broaden and complement the work that we're doing here. It's very simple, asking questions about our relationship to reality. Is it true? Is it really true? Oh my God, the story that I have is not true. There are ingredients to it that are historical facts, but the way I have created the story is a total lie to protect me, or to exonerate me, or to excuse me. That turnaround is the curtain parting so that I can see the lie of the third column, my beliefs, and the distortion of that, and really get to the truth of the motives that are coming from my self-centeredness. Well, let's see. Let's go back to that for just a. Well, no. Let's stay with this. All right. So, if you've done some third column work here today or in the past that you're just sort of building on, and you want to take a look at it through the lens of what we just talked about, capture the perceived role, like you're in a drama and the script writer has a very short description in the script of betrayed spouse or abused parent or abandoned child, whatever the description is, and then ask yourself at least those 5 questions about your motive, selfish, your behavior, self-seeking. Where are you dishonest? Where are you fearful? And what's your real role? What is your perceived role there and responsibility in creating this resentment? Not your perceived role as a victim, but your role in creating this resentment. And then go, if you want to look at the character defects, that might be helpful, but then go to the benefit and or the real role in contrast to the perceived role. I'm not an abandoned child. I'm 50 years old, whatever. At the age that I was doing this work, I'm not a child. And I might have been abandoned, but I'm not abandoned now, but I'm a self-abandoning man. My perception and delusion that I've operated on for 30 years is that I was an abandoned child. Woe is me. I'm not dismissing or diminishing it or making fun of it. I'm really not. But I am attempting to pierce through the lie that we tell ourselves to see the truth. I'm not an abandoned child. I'm a self-abandoning adult. I'm not a misunderstood employee. I'm a completely narcissistic man, self-serving to the very unhealthy level. That's the turnaround to see the truth. Peeling back those masks of the matrushka, the nesting dolls, peeling the one mask at a time. Or as we do here in Southern California, talk about the Hollywood storefront. Well, you've seen movies that look really real, but if you saw the set, all it is empty facades on streets so that they can film it in a make-believe town. Most of us live in a make-believe reality. We don't know that we don't know, and we can't see that we don't see. If you're interested in attempting to unpack your fourth column in light of your third column, whatever you wrote or thought or experience, I'm happy to work with you right now.
How would you like me to start? With my perceived role?
I would like you to start with your resentment from the third column.
Okay.
And your self-esteem. So third column, resentment and self-esteem and fear over from the third column, then go to the perceived role and fourth column.
Okay. So I resent my mom for not making a big effort to like Chris. That's the guy I've been dating for 3 years.
Okay. All right.
My self-esteem, my deep belief about who I am is that I'm smart and make great choices in mates. I would never date an undesirable man or a creep. She used to have this thing she'd call the creep theory, where great when women date creepy guys or great men date creepy women, that couples would sometimes one of the couple is a creep.
So what she's doing there, just as an FYI, is telling you who she is. She's not telling you about who you are. This is her experience. So that's the lenses through which she's looking.
Okay.
Anyway, that might be helpful. Go back to this now. So your self-esteem, you wrote, yes, good. And what's your fear when you say all of those things?
Is that I am someone who picks a creepy mate. It does not a good mate.
A broken picker is what one of my friends calls it.
Okay.
All right. And so now go over to the fourth column. What's your perceived role?
I wrote a disrespected daughter.
All right. Yep. Excellent. And when you feel like the disrespected daughter, how do you, I like to start with behavior because it's the easiest to get to. How do you behave? On the form, it's number one, self-seeking.
I'm a little cold to her, I keep that part of my life separate from her.
Yeah, I'm cold and secretive.
Uh-huh.
All right. And number two, selfish. Where are you coming from? Self-centered motives.
I'm a little confused in this spot, but what comes to mind is that I expect her to have the same opinion about men as I do.
Yeah, you expect her to be different than she is. Yeah. And I allow my sense of her valuation to impact me.
Yeah. Okay. So that belongs in there.
Unhealthy thinking that, I mean, why do you give her opinion any weight at all?
Yeah.
Or to the extent that you give it any weight, you're giving her power over you. That's a huge lesson in emotional sobriety. My image is that I'm a puppet on strings. Circumstances and people determine how I feel because they're holding the strings.
Yeah.
The point of this work is to take the scissors and cut the strings. Dr. Berger says we place our center of gravity deep inside ourselves, never in circumstances and people. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tragic.
Well, it is if we allow it to persist, and it doesn't happen because we think it and say it. It happens because we believe it's true and we begin to try to disassociate from that so that people don't have the power.
Mhm.
We try to empower ourselves. And that, as you know, that's a process.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3, dishonest.
Misrepresenting. So would that be misrepresenting myself to other people or to myself?
Yes, both. Absolutely both. Mhm.
All I can say is that I feel like I'm bifurcated. Like half the time I trying to talk myself into breaking up with him to align myself with her opinion of him. And the other time I'm fiercely angry at her because she's not approving of him and I'm defensive.
Well, in both cases, it's your problem.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does that belong in that area, the dishonest?
Sure. What it belongs wherever you want to put it, because it's a great insight. You're just giving your power away
Mhm.
in both circumstances.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's hard, but Al-Anon has made a great science of detaching from other people's opinion.
Mhm.
Detach with love is their phrase, and it just means that the puppet strings are cut. Thanks, Mom. I didn't ask for your opinion, and in the future, I actually don't want your opinion.
Mhm.
Depending on how far you want to go, with the possibility of injuring your relationship.
Do you think healthy people, meaning if and I know we don't like pop psychology words, but let's just say she's a healthy person and she sees me stand up for myself and reject her opinion, would she be would she respect that if she were somebody, or is it just, we don't know? Okay, that's going too far off.
Again, you see, you're trying to read minds and write scripts about other people.
Mhm.
Not very productive.
Right.
She's just going to be who she is and react how she reacts, and it says who she is. It has no references to who you are, unless you really give her the credit for being a balanced and insightful and intuitive and experienced person. And you actually really say, well, I may be really out of line and unhealthy in my choices. I mean, there's a healthy sense that it may or may not be helpful to you. Yeah.
That was one of my fears on the third column page,
bet.
that she's right, because
There
in a
you
lot of
go.
areas she is a good judge of character. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4 is well, that was dishonest. And how about fear? Number 4.
Yeah, I fear that I'm not going to have the support of her or other people as well.
And then you challenge yourself as to why you need their support. Underneath that fear is what, though?
Oh, is that I am making a bad choice. Is that right?
And I'm flawed, that I actually don't know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, those are grist for the mill when you do the fear inventory next, to get underneath of the fear, to see where does that all come from.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, and so that's just setting yourself up for more work. Like most of the column 4 items that I have there are setting you up for more work, like in the harm area, in the character defects area, in the fear area. Right. So number 5 is a crucial question. That's really where the turnaround might happen. What's your role and responsibility in generating this resentment?
I'm not sure about that, because I
Yes,
would
you
say.
are. Yes, you are quite sure, actually. You're not seeing it, but all through this conversation, you are suspecting and quite sure of the source of this. But go ahead.
I think you're going to say that I'm at fault because I'm letting her opinion affect me.
That was what I was going to say.
You can say.
It's
What
the
I-
lack of self-confidence at the one level and severe codependence on the other level.
Okay. I thought what I went to originally was that I did not confront her about it or have a discussion.
Why do you need to?
Yeah,
You want her to change?
I do.
And you expect her to change because you're going to talk to her?
Well, probably not, but it might help.
Well, no. That very thought, it might help. It's a total delusion.
Mhm.
Has it ever?
It almost made it worse because I did kind of confront her and then she made a half-hearted attempt, which was just annoying, actually.
There, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
She was like,
It's really hard to accept other people with their brokenness,
Mhm.
or at least what you perceive to be their brokenness or their difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it may not be brokenness, it just may be different.
It's completely different from how I would treat one of my kids' loved ones. If they love somebody, it's
See,
completely.
and that's a total projection on your part. You're writing the script because I'm a really kind and loving and effective person, and the way I operate and think and feel should be the script for everybody else.
Mhm.
You're smiling because
Because I tell myself that, but I haven't had relief in 3 years. So
that's because, well, what is the current definition of insanity?
yeah, it's doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Do you really hear that?
Yeah.
Are you getting different results that are healthy?
No, I'm stuck here. I was listening a lot with the prayer, the prayer that you were just talking about.
Yeah. All right. And so let's look at question number 9, character defects.
I would say codependence right off the bat.
All right. Yeah. What does it mean to you, codependence?
That would mean, well, yeah, that's a good question. What I'm meaning when I say it this time is that I want someone else's approval to feel okay about myself.
That couldn't be a better definition.
Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. And so number 10, the benefit or value for generating the resentment.
I can't come to that one, figure that one out. Hold on.
Yes, you can. What's the benefit that you get from attempting to change your mother?
Avoiding taking responsibility for my own choices, or
Partly. Yeah. But holding on to the belief I'm right.
okay.
God damn it. I'm right.
So it's a fear of holding on to that belief. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's just anger. That's the benefit to you. As long as I can be angry enough that I'm right, maybe I'll change the situation. I don't know.
So you're saying I may or may not be right, but it doesn't matter because I have my.
Oh, you're not right.
Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, you haven't seen that yet.
I think we're talking about two different things, but I mean, I was talking about the right choice of a mate, but.
Yeah. No, your anger is about your mother.
Yeah. Okay.
No, you're, well, maybe it's a cover for your fear that you're wrong and she's right.
Mm-hmm.
That could be it there. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. So the perceived role at the top
was a disrespected daughter.
And what's the truth at the bottom? What's the turnaround?
I wrote an unrealistic daughter.
Good. Unrealistic is good, but turn the words disrespected daughter inside out.
Disrespectful daughter.
Who are you being disrespectful of?
her opinions
No.
about, no?
No.
Okay. This is good.
It may be, but no, the heart of it is you're disrespectful of yourself and your own opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
huge. That's huge.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even consider that, which goes to
Right.
show how far I am from being there.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. That's great.
Well, and that's what happens when you can get crisp and specific at the beginning
Mhm.
and specific as you go through it, and then attempt to play with just turning it inside out
Mhm.
to see if in fact it can be crisp, just like we did, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that you had an experience with it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It feels right. It feels
Yeah.
great.
yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Quite frankly, that was a classic model of going through the third and the fourth column and the dialogue where there was no right or wrong answer there. We teased it out. Sometimes we explored blind alleys that didn't, it didn't work out. We don't have to force it. But at the end, the organic nature of that turnaround that she experienced, which was a huge surprise for her, the curtain parted, something that she hadn't anticipated or explored. And she was able to not just see it and understand it. I hope you saw that. She had an experience with it. And that kind of experience is life-changing because it changes the way we look at reality. But again, that's where experience comes in because I can help lead her down through that. And she's got her own experience with it. And we've had many, many personal conversations. None of this stuff is easy or automatic.
Herb, can I ask one more question before?
Please. Yeah.
This was back on the third column. Is sex relations always answered? Like even in this one, I'm talking about my mom.
Well, but it's about gender. What's your belief about mothers? What's your belief about daughters? Yes, it's always answered.
Okay, so we always answer it. Okay.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not about sex.
Right.
It's about gender. So we can explore male, female variations on a theme, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, mothers and daughters. There's 4 variations on it right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a way of backing away just from the personal relations, sort of backing away to your general relation.
Well, the whole point is to transcend your personal dynamic to go to the archetypal.
Right. Okay.
Using the archetypal. What's the template that
Okay.
I'm using as the lens? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Great. Thanks.
I think this is a quick question, but that's always a dumb thing to say.
No. It's just we'll see, right?
Yes, we will. We'll see. So at the end of that, I am a disrespectful daughter, and then you said disrespectful of myself. And what is meant by that? Disrespectful of myself because I'm trying to latch on to something and change it and control it to make it how I want it, and that's disrespecting myself.
So yeah, she's disrespecting her own value, her own competence, her own experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her own competence and experience because she's doubting because of what this other person is saying.
Her mother.
Okay. That helps. That helps a lot.
You asked the question because it bears it's not necessarily intuitive.
Yeah, I did see that just sort of visceral reaction.
Exactly.
Reaction. I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
you.
Yeah. I sitting in my room with the instructions I had from this man in 1988 by myself writing this out and then having a healthy reaction to it. I flushed red. There was nobody in the room, but I was so embarrassed in my own presence. Yeah.
Right. I wish that I had done this 1 week ago because I tried to force a solution this past week.
Yeah.
And I did harm.
And so now you have a chance to clean it up.
Yeah.
Because you're conscious. See, we only learn usually we learn experientially by making mistakes and then correcting them. It's the accumulated course correction that gives us wisdom.
I'm going to write that one down, Herb. Thank you.
Well, yeah, because that's why most young people are not wise. They haven't made enough mistakes.
Oh, gosh. Say thank you.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, there's where humility comes in. Well, yes. Yes, I'm experiencing my humanness, my frailty, my dysfunction, and I'm accepting it. Oh yeah, there I go again.
Yeah. Yep. It's not over. I asked my a program person years ago, when is it over? She said, when you're dead.
Well, my wife will take it a step further. She said, about 30 days after you're dead.
Say more about that. 30 days after. What happens 30 days after?
Well, I mean, it's what she is saying tongue in cheek is the ego is so strong it survives for a while.
It survives death.
Yeah.
Boy, that is strong. Because that ego, that's out there doing push-ups in the parking lot. When we're in a meeting, right?
During the meeting.
During the meeting.
And in the meeting.
The whole thing, before, during, and after.
Have you ever seen ego expressed in a meeting?
Oh my goodness.
All the time. Mm-hmm.
In a meeting.
Right, of course.
Yes. How dare that person interrupt me?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, without laughing.
Or not call on me. I didn't raise my hand, but they should intuitively know that I'm the wisdom person in the room that can address this issue.
Or if I'm the lead speaker, then everybody has to give me platitudes, and I can't believe how profound that was.
Oh, and be quiet and not get up to go get coffee while I'm speaking, for God's sakes.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we're so funny.
This is very humbling because I've been working with you for 13 years now, over 12. And I couldn't see that on my own. So what I'm seeing is that, but I think I could with the sponsee. Do you think we need, this is like the fifth step part of it. We need to talk to somebody else. Like I could not see that in myself after a dozen years with you. So.
Well, and that's it. It's progressive. And you've heard me share about the dimmer switch, and the dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time. And there's a little bit more light and a little bit more light. And that dimmer switch goes up our entire life if we stay gently pressed up against it. And it goes up and it goes up. And then, I mean, this is a particularly intimate relationship and long-term relationship that you've had with your mother. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's going to be potentially more difficult and more revealing as you, in fact, thaw out and unpack it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hi, Herb. I just want to put a plug in for the prayer for freedom from resentment. Okay. I have had difficulty with my older sister for years and years and years, and when I was in your class and you introduced this prayer, I started praying this for my sister. I started praying this prayer, inserting my sister's name in it. And it was life-changing because it was like the second to the last line was highlighted where it says, bring me to accept reality as it is. I cannot change my sister. She is what she is. And that was life-changing. And then I was able to go on and do my third and fourth column on her. That being said, she's going to be here. She's coming to my area the last week in July for 2 weeks. So I have my prayer ready in case I need it, but I know it works. So I just wanted to put a plug in for the prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just make this comment. Thank you so much for your sharing of your experience. And my comment is, we don't pray to change other people. We don't pray to change God. We pray to be changed. And it's the prayer who becomes changed. And I think it has to do with some sort of a new consciousness that we get from just praying consciously, this whatever it is we're healing prayer that we're praying for.
Good afternoon, Herb, and good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
I've heard so much, and we all have so much in common and not in common.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, all the human beings are really essentially the same.
Oh, I always said I just want to be heard.
Yeah.
And, I want to be appreciated.
Yes.
And, and I'm stuck on a merry-go-round because I came into relationships, especially with my wife, to take, in my mind, to love her, to rescue her. And I guess you always hear about women that try to change their men. Well, men also try to change their women. And I was so wrong for so many years.
Yeah.
And now it comes down to, I'm learning to just accept the parts of my wife that I fell in love with when I married her. That was the contract. She is not going to change. And I played this merry-go-round game that if I love her or spoil her, she'll finally love me the way I always wanted.
Oh my God.
Ain't gonna happen.
Not usually. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm a little perplexed because I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Except to accept, acceptance.
Or want to accept it and pray for acceptance and be open to being changed so that you can accept it, knowing that you can't do that.
I know, but this fantasy of it's going to be better tomorrow because I did this.
Yes.
It's like, no, it's not. So again, it's acceptance, and I need to make the decision to get off this merry-go-round because I identified with so many people saying, dropping out. I mean, I came into FA 8 years ago, and I learned that by experiential, and I'm probably the most persistent dropout anybody will ever meet, that I react to food, because of my emotions. And every time, and I've worked with you directly and indirectly over the last 3 to 4 years, I would get to the fourth step. I would drop out and I would eat. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something that I was protecting or hiding. And and so there's something that I guess the fourth step's tough. And when you introduced me to the big book, I couldn't believe that they wrote this book about me. They didn't even know me. But I really gave the key that you introduced me to was through the big book was the fact that there was no shame in dropping out. And that even Bill, I guess it was Bill, intellectually knew the program, but he didn't get sober for a long time. Yeah. Do I have that right? Yeah.
So Bob, actually, yeah.
Oh, Bob, forgive me.
Yeah.
So intellectually, I know Al-Anon, I know the 12 steps. I didn't apply it to me. And now it's tough because now I'm looking within. It's no longer sort of codependent to save the alcoholic and all the issues. Right. I'm also aware, and then I have just 2 questions, if I may. I grew up in an environment where you were taught not to get angry. I mean, angry probably because of the alcoholic who was very emotionally abusive and a real bully. So, you suppress yourself, but I used love. I mean, it was very, maybe this is passive aggressive, but I used love instead of anger. So even in the business world, I was always the nice guy. I was always the lover of clients and people.
Yeah.
And I was always very fearful of authority figures and anger. So that's something I'm working on now through these, the fourth step. So the question I have for you is, and I approached religion and I did not find my answers, my spiritual answers in religion. What were you introduced to when you left the seminary and got into AA? What did you find that you could not find in the seminary? I'd like to hear your words because I love the way you put things in words.
Yeah. I was introduced to recovery accidentally in a way because my wife went into a hospital to deal with her addiction. And they asked me to take a look at my relationship to drinking, a very laser focused autobiography on my history with drinking, because they knew, and they also knew that I didn't. So that they gave me this as a perhaps introduction to an awareness of my history of drinking. And it worked because when I wrote it out, I suspected that I had a problem. But when I read it out, I was convinced that I had a problem, as were the group that I read it to. And I trusted that. But your question is deeper than that. Your question is, what did I find in AA that I didn't find in the seminary? And I didn't find that for 4 years. I was in AA with a sponsor, going to a meeting every day, calling my sponsor every day. And for 4 years, I did all of that external stuff, but it didn't touch anything internal, nothing. I didn't know that because I was getting this, more information, more therapy, more connection to people, more adulation, because I'm pretty articulate even when I'm not changed. I understand stuff and I can talk about it and put it in a context that impresses people. I have that ability, all right? But it didn't change anything. So a direct answer to your question is, the man who took me through the steps was a step guide. It took a year to go through the steps. And this column 3, column 4 business began to crack me open to see the truth of my delusions and the lie that I had told myself that I had never seen. And then when I got to the 11th step, this man helped me really understand and begin a practice of meditation. It was 6 years later. I've never answered the question this way. It was 6 years later that I was introduced to a man who took me through steps 2 and 3, where I finally began to have an authentic relationship with power, with God, which then allowed me to have a meditation practice that made sense. Up till then, it was merely a meditation practice, not based on a connection with anything except what I consider to be spirituality. But once I had an authentic connection to steps 2 and 3, I found that all of my vocabulary and experience and knowledge up till that point was the very impediment to my relationship with power, with God, with the light. Everything that I had learned was the obstacle and impediment to my relationship with the light. I didn't know what I was looking for in the monastery, except there was something intuitive that I was looking for.
You were drinking at the monastery, right?
No drinking.
Oh.
7 years, no drinking. No,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, there was no drinking. But there was also no change and no experience. But I didn't know that either. Because I wore a Roman collar, don't you know? I'm spiritual.
Yeah.
And so it was at 10 years of sobriety that I finally connected with that which I was seeking, not knowing what I was seeking, but when I found it, I knew it.
What I'm so impressed with is that you gave up your drug of choice in spite of being, finding that enlightenment. Because every time I try to get more enlightened about myself, it gets a little too painful. I can't go from here to here.
Right.
And that food, for me, is just
food is the most difficult of the addictions. I've mentioned that many times. And I didn't give up drinking. I was released from it.
Mhm.
I didn't even know that I'd been released from it for 90 to 120 days. When I look back and I go, I'm not drinking and I'm not even inclined to drink. It was like a big surprise to me.
Yeah. I have to remind myself every day that I deserve, I'm entitled to this enlightenment.
Yes. Yeah.
And
well, and that it is available.
I know. Yeah.
Is available. Now, it doesn't come because you want it. It doesn't come because you do the steps. It doesn't come because you try real hard. The whole nature of grace is gift, never earned. I don't understand it. I know that it's promised in the big book by the time you finish the 9th step. That's the promise, a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It is promised right there. Pages 84, 85, very dense material, worthy of spending some time unpacking. That's the transition. Not a moment before you finish your 9th step is the promise. Now, it might happen earlier, as it does with most of us. Unpredictably. It might come in the 1st step, it might come in the 5th step. Unpredictably.
You've answered the second question I had, which is breaking the code, because we're just talking about that. And, so I have to fasten my seatbelt, or in my case, unfasten my seatbelt to change.
Right. Right. You're welcome. And trust the process. Make sure that you're connected to somebody who is both a knowledgeable and experienced guide. Those two things. Knowledge only won't get it. Experience only won't get it. It's that combination that's really, I think, the formula.
Hi, Herb. Thank you so much for today. And the last speaker, Ed, kind of touched on this, but since I'm on the phone, I want to ask you. So I'm also in FA and, got sober in my early 20s and never believed I would never drink again. Went to meetings, but never really worked the steps. I did go to a recovery program for the food addiction. And I guess, what I want to say is, I guess my question to you is this is kind of like what Ed was talking about, is that I find myself repeating the insanity of the things that I know that don't work with the food, with the binging, just really crazy stuff, and saying, but why do I keep doing that, and getting some abstinence and then back in. And this morning, I thought I went online to a women's AA meeting. I thought maybe I need to be working with an AA sponsor, somebody to bring me through those steps. You know what I'm saying?
Well, when you say an AA sponsor to take you through those steps, what are you contrasting it with?
Oh, I guess with maybe in the food program that it feels like, quote, it feels like it's a different thing, that they have you go through an AWOL that's a year long, but if you break your abstinence of 3,
I'm familiar with it.
Okay.
But when you go through an AWOL,
yeah,
what have you done? What have you gone through?
Nothing, Herb, because I always break my abstinence. I'm
it's not about breaking your abstinence, but my understanding of an AWOL, it's wonderful for a newcomer and somebody within the first year or two, perhaps, of their recovery, because it gives you an exposure to the steps, but it doesn't go very deep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't go deep in the steps at all. It's a wonderful journey. I'm totally supportive of it, to get a perspective on the steps, if that's what you actually get. But it doesn't do It doesn't even come close to what we're doing here.
Yeah.
For instance, in the third and fourth column.
Gotcha.
I would
Okay.
assume that you've never heard these words before if you haven't been exposed to my work.
Not really. I sat in on one of your things. Yeah. So that kind of helps me make my decision about finding a sponsor who's an AA who's really works the steps with people.
Or finding a sponsor in FA who has done the step work out of the big book. And not an AWOL necessarily, but something that's gone way deeper.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I'm going to ask you a weird question, but I'm going to ask it. And that is, what is this thing? What is this difficulty about staying like clean and sober from the food, like being a drunk?
You're not treating your unmanageability, which is the spiritual malady. You're attempting to deal with your addiction over which you have no power. At the end of the 9th step, it says you are placed in a position of neutrality. The implication, I believe, is with addiction. But then it immediately says, but you're not cured. You have a daily reprieve. Right. My interpretation is you have a daily reprieve from unmanageability, like you were talking about. I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do.
Right. That's it.
It is it. That's right. But it's the best kept secret in the rooms, and most people don't know
it. All right. Well, you're great. I appreciate that. So, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your question. That's it's very sad that not only is it the experience in the food programs, it's the experience in AA, by the way. What you just described is pandemic, even in AA. They don't know that they don't, and they don't know that they don't know. And they suffer and they relapse. Anyway, don't get me started. So obviously the step after step 4 is the final steps in the removal of the obstacles in us to the light that is in us, steps 5, 6, and 7. Please join me in this prayer of transformation. Spirit of the universe, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to this life. Thanks, everybody. I hope that was helpful, and we'll be seeing you on our mutual journeys